Welcome to the Cities Are for Living podcast, an official podcast of the International Project Management Association. Join hosts Dr. Beverly Pasian from the Netherlands and Peter Ahmad from South Africa as they explore this world of smart and livable cities. Through the stories and perspectives shared by project managers across the globe, each episode seeks to offer valuable insights, practical advice, and engaging discussions on the latest best practices in the project management field. The Cities Are for Living podcast is for project managers, built environment professionals, and community groups interested in expanding a community of practice, maximizing the impacts of projects across the globe, and enhancing the quality of life for all citizens. Welcome to this first full episode of the Cities Are for Living podcast, brought to you by the International Project Management Association. Today, we're focusing on the efforts of Canada's Calgary city. For the past decade, Calgary has been celebrated as one of the most livable cities in North America, in fact globally. And in today's episode, we learn how Calgary has set new standards for smart city planning, focusing on social justice and in community engagement, thanks to significant strides in smart city principles and technology that benefits both its residents and businesses alike. In this episode, we have Dr. Beverly Pasian, representing the IPMA, and she's supported in the Netherlands by Ralph Goosen. And from Calgary's Smart Cities team, we're excited to hear from project manager Erin Ruttan. She explains how Calgary has gone about boosting digital equity, improving the quality of life, and ultimately ensuring the safety of all of its residents. You'll hear about a range of initiatives from digital literacy to advanced emergency communication systems. And Erin's insights on Calgary gives a unique approach on how to make lives better on an everyday basis through basic smart city planning and principles. So tune in and discover how Calgary is leading the way in smart city planning with a focus on social justice and community engagement. As always, we really hope you'll enjoy this episode.
My name is Erin Ruttan, and I'm a project manager with the City of Calgary's Smart Cities team. So our Smart Cities team sits underneath information technology. And my role with our team is fairly unique, and our Smart Cities team in itself is fairly unique and different from our other IT project managers. We work with all lines of service to address the interconnectivity of technology and technology transformation, innovation, accessibility, and the evolving needs of Calgarians. And like all those great things that help keep Calgary a resilient city, we look at our Smart Cities as sort of 4 pillars now. We shifted them. So 4 pillars is experimentation, partnerships and regional collaboration, storytelling and engagement, and then digital equity, which was the piece that I was primarily, I started doing. I was hired to build our digital equity strategy. So when we think about digital equity, it's really anything that reduces a person's ability to access the internet, get the device they need to connect online the way they need to and the way they want to, or whatever knowledge they might need in order to connect safely online. So I spent, I want to say about 2 years building that strategy out with our community and doing engagement, speaking to Calgarians, researching what's been going on globally to build our strategy. And now we're implementing the strategy. And so I'm still working on that, but I'm also working on a broadcast portfolio. So leveraging the new broadcast protocol, so ATSC 3.0, Advanced Television Systems Committee Protocol number 3, to help, again, like make Calgary more resilient and communicate with Calgarians on the channels that they have access to.
And what kind of channels should I think of? Is that kind of a city radio or?
Yeah, so it's over the air, it's broadcast television, but we're not looking at TV, we're looking at data casting. So everything really outside of the box of the television, from communications within our first responder teams to emergency alerting out to the community to any kind of IP internet protocol based device. So you can send messaging to phones, computers, televisions, digital signage, anything with an IP address. So it really helps open up opportunity to send timely emergency communications that can be location specific. So in the case of giant flooding, depending on where you are, you're going to need to evacuate in a different direction. So all of those details can be quite granular and messaging sent out at the same time that is specific to the location of the person receiving it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then there's a huge remote education piece. I could talk about it for 1,000 years. So
I would like to hear about that education piece. Yeah.
There's the ability to, using set-top receiver boxes, but you push out educational content that's cached in the box. So areas that are hard to reach, potentially rural and remote. There's been some work being done in the States on this. They started leveraging during the pandemic. And so we're looking to leverage the same thing in areas of Calgary where we know that there's no internet signal and folks that potentially need to be schooling from home. You know, the 30%, I believe, of Calgarians have opted to continue with online schooling this last year, just for various health reasons of family members. But we also know, because of the digital divide, there's people that need to be able to leverage that, but don't have the opportunity. So that either means that children are going to school and they're risking health, or they're not going to school because internet is just simply not affordable. So to be able to send out educational content to the set-top box that could then be viewed either on the television or on your smartphone, the box Bluetooths to, again, any IP device, and you can, at your leisure, do educational content. So it's very secure communication. So it also gives the opportunity to have tailored education for youth in correctional facilities. So we have one of 2 correctional facilities in Alberta, in Calgary. And it's a fairly under talked about issue, is the problem of education of youth that are in correctional facilities, because they may not be getting exactly what they need. So this would allow them to get exactly. So to help them reintegrate, again, tailored education, it's the grade level they need, it's the courses they need, it's the ones they were taking, not just simply what they can get in youth penitentiary. So, and then again, using that same technology to support rural and remote communities. So areas that are hard to reach, you can send the data from tower to tower and get into those communities that don't otherwise have internet access.
Yeah. And are you also involved in developing the content, for instance, for these educational programs for correctional facilities?
No, I wouldn't be involved in developing the content. I know in the States I can't remember the name of the group. I can pull it up, maybe IEI, but they have some really great educational content that they've worked with, not post-secondary, but secondary school, like teachers, to build and develop and put the content online. And I know Calgary does have, because we do have online learning, I imagine that there's some curriculum, but it would be, once we're in experimentation, so I have experimental license to do this testing. Once we're past the experimentation phase and know what works and what's going to work best and the best solutions for our communities, it's a matter of getting working with educators to get content. Yeah. And why reinvent the wheel? There is some great stuff out there. I just don't know what Calgary Board of Education, what sort of arrangements and deals and things that they have. So yeah, we're not there yet. We're just getting our equipment up and running, and it's going to start testing. So.
Yep.
One of the things I noted was the link between social justice and many of the elements and activities that you just described. That's one of the characteristics of the city of Calgary that makes it so progressive, so unique amongst the world of smart cities, because it does place that emphasis. That's one of the reasons why in my research, Calgary was portrayed as the smart social justice city. So I look forward to diving into that a bit more deeply when we speak about that theme. Let me introduce myself. I'm Bev Pasian. Erin and I, we met more than a year and a half ago, I guess.
Yeah, I was trying to remember what it was. I was like, I don't quite know.
It was a while ago. And you and Monique were so generous with your time being interviewed by me as part of my PhD. And when the idea of an IPMA podcast emerged, you immediately came to mind. And I'm so glad that we could make this happen. The IPMA podcast series is the focus of not just this interview, but other cities that reflect quality of life in their smart city planning that is particularly valuable, inspirational, meaningful in one or more ways. I also found it very important when you were talking about rural needs, and your emphasis there was on educational content, but more broadly speaking, the digital equity that must be top of mind, not just for the city of Calgary, but for other smart cities. I mentioned that because within the IPMA, SIG, or a special interest group, it has just, in fact, expanded its remit, its focus to the rural world, so that we aren't just thinking of the urban landscape, we're thinking of the rural landscape. Your comments on the importance of emergency broadcasting and having dedicated channels for delivering educational content is especially appropriate for this podcast, but for IPMA interests, I suppose, more generally. Where would we like to start? The first thing I mentioned when we were talking about smart city podcasting was the emphasis on quality of life. And I know from my own research that is a driving principle. And I couldn't help but notice the City of Calgary's website. And I don't want to call it a slogan, it's more meaningful than that, but a vision, I suppose, of making life better every day. What does that mean?
We call that our purpose. So,
okay.
So that's the vision of the city is Calgary is a great place to make a living and a great place to make a life. And then our purpose, so that what the driving force behind the work that we do is making lives better every day. So when I think like rolling out a digital equity strategy, what is my goal? Really, like what the primary purpose, I want to make lives better. If you're working in recreation facility, if you're working in IT, if you're working in parks, your purpose is to make lives better. So everything we're doing because it's helping our communities, and helping people live better, even if it's something as simple as like cutting lawns, right? Because that's actually like not, there's actually quite a huge amount of manual labor that goes into that. We've got a lot of parks. So those pieces that you might not necessarily think about that add, or maybe not everybody thinks about, that add to the quality of life. Like, would you rather walk through a city that's like dirty and riddled in garbage and there's weeds everywhere and things aren't maintained and it's bugs and pests and itchy and allergy and all those things? Or would you, like, we take for granted how beautiful and how much park space we have and how well maintained that space is, and that makes the lives of our communities better because they have these beautiful places they can go and relax, and they don't really have to think about it, and they don't have to put any effort into making that place beautiful.
It's an area within urban planning that I don't think gets the attention it deserves. In my research, one of the themes is beautification. And it is not a topic, not a priority that a stunning number of cities ignore. And it's disappointing that,
I think it just needs a better name. Like, right? Because it's like, why are we spending money on beautification? Well, what if we, like, I don't know what you'd call it, but something.
Parks and stuff. Parks and stuff. When I think of smart city projects, for me, they are inherently optimistic. By their nature, they are inherently optimistic because the people behind them are planning a better future. It is not a project that you think is going to keep things status quo. It is for a better future. And how cities can't include parks or beautification or related things in their planning is a surprise to me. But in Calgary, it's part of the DNA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Yeah. And
is Calgary also planning new parks, or is it more a matter of we already have so much green space, but we need to make sure that we maintain it well and that it stays beautiful?
And to be honest, I don't know what we have planned, if there's new parks planned. I know like built into like our neighborhood development, there's park space and green space and, you know, walking features in those. So we build these like new communities are all walkable communities and meant to be really complete communities whenever they can be. And then the parks that we have a lot of them. And when they do need a refresh or refurbish, as much as possible involve the community that park is in. And like, so, okay, if we're going to redo this, what do you want it to look like? And like everything from working at schools and getting kids ideas and what they'd like to the adults in the community and people that use the space don't necessarily live there, but access it. So
that's an interesting topic, because you mentioned that, like, we're going to ask the community what do they want if we're going to do something with this park. But how do you identify who is the community? For instance, as a bit of background, I'm thinking of other cities where I've been, where physically there's a lot of green, but it is concentrated in one area of the city. So like half of the population really has to travel to get into a park. Well, for the other half of the city, it's within walking distance or 5 minutes on bicycle or whatever. It's not only, let's say, is there enough green space, but also can everybody reach it? And from there comes my question, like, who is then the community that you're asking if you're going to work on green space or parks?
Yeah, and so we're really lucky, and I think this is another like unique thing about Calgary is we have a team that's dedicated to public engagement. So we have the Engage Resource Unit. I worked in that unit for 2 years, and those folks, they live and breathe public engagement, and a big part of why they're so good at what they do is the ability to identify target groups and who needs to, who is the community, right? So, and the answer is it depends. So for example, there was some engagement done, we had like the flyover. So getting into the city from Memorial, it's like the 5th and 4th Ave flyover. And underneath it had just this like gross concrete space that's in the back of the Bridgeland community, and then separates not the highway, but the big main road. It backs onto that. And so there's houses there, and then there's a school right here. So there's this opportunity to make this a usable space instead of just this kind of sketchy concrete underpass. And so the community is engaged. So going out to specifically the Bridgeland community, so from their community association, and talking to folks that just lived in the area. So you had an invite to this particular engagement, also to the school that's right there. So talking with those kids to see like, what would you like to see here? It's right in your backyard. How would you use this space? And then there were opportunities for Calgarians as a whole to provide some input into that, but starting with that immediate community. So the people who are right there and directly impacted, that engagement might look different than Calgary as a whole. If it's the park next to my house, I'm going to be a little bit more impacted than the person who lives 5 kilometers away and just likes to use it. But everybody still gets their voice, right? So it's not leaving anybody out of the conversation. As an example.
And on the City of Calgary website, there is an amazing collection of maps. And one of them is the City of Calgary Capital Projects map.
Okay.
And there is a category called Parks and Open Spaces, unfortunately, which is very promising. But then you click on that link and no projects are in that category, which is, I think, fine, because there is so much natural landscape in and around the Calgary area anyway. One could easily interpret the absence of current projects as a job has already been done. And so no projects are currently happening because we've already done a lot of work in that area. So it would be necessary for our listeners to get supplemental information about each city's experiences so that other project managers from around the world can benefit from the City of Calgary's experiences and information resources that are publicly available. We started talking about the city's purpose. As a Canadian, I think that is a purpose that certainly resonates with me. I also think it resonates with Calgary and has done for many, 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 many years. Is it a purpose making lives better that you think is well understood in the urban planning world, at least across Alberta?
I'm not in the urban planning world. Come on, Beverly. I don't do urban planning. I don't know what those folks think about.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
But truly, I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a better answer. Well, I suppose by asking the question, I'm also being optimistic and hopeful, because it is my wish that from this podcasting experience that people are inspired to share these messages. So even though you don't know the answer to that question, I hope that listeners to this will be inspired to look for that same purpose in the cities where they live. It's my belief, and part of, again, the research that I've done that suggests that in the world of smart cities, project managers are advocates as much as they are implementers. And that's what you sound like. You sound like an advocate. So, keep your advocacy going.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I joke that I work in IT, right? But really, I joke I'm a social worker who works in IT. Because, like you say, my role is I'm advocating for digital equity. I'm advocating for equality amongst community members that we often just take for granted. Oh, everybody's got access to the internet. Like, oh, you don't have a computer, but you have a phone, but you need a data plan for that phone. You need the phone. You can't create content on a phone very handily either. So yeah, I came from social services. So that's my background. I was a decade working in social services before I came in to do this. So to have the purpose of our city being to make lives better every day, that's really the only reason why I'm still in Calgary. Beverly, I think I'm not from Calgary. I'm from Ontario. And I came out here kind of on a whim. and and I've stayed because there was this opportunity to implement some really cool programs. And again, I started running social programs and building social programs for the city. And now here I am 15 years later, still in Calgary and having these opportunities to do some really cool stuff with smart cities that will hopefully, and that optimistic, right? So improve quality of life for folks, and not just within our city limits, but outside of our city and on a grander scale across Canada.
It is important to me that project managers in this world see themselves at the beginning of the day and the end of the day as citizens first. And that's what you sound like you prioritize. You're a project manager for the city of Calgary, but you're there because that work resonates with you as a person more importantly than anything else. It's the career path of somebody who I think it's not a traditional career path for project managers. And I wonder how much that might resonate with our listeners, that they can get into the world of project management that might, in your case, be in an IT office or related to an IT function, but that's not the world you came from. The career path of a project manager like yourself is not the traditional project management career path, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, what is building a social program if not project management, right? It's all those pieces that you learn when you take a project management course. I just did it as trial by fire before I took it in the courses to learn how to do it. So, but absolutely, the non-traditional path, I think, if nothing else, gives me a very different perspective, and helps to see that big picture again, because I come from looking at this the larger picture of things.
It is also important that our listeners have a practical, perhaps, understanding or a pragmatic appreciation for the skills and the resources and the education of what it means to be a project manager in the smart city world. Can you briefly touch on the education that you mentioned and the skills and knowledge or aptitudes that you think makes you a successful PM in this space?
A lot of what I pull from is experience in, again, building and running programs and events and that sort of thing. I can't even remember how long ago it would have been now, over a decade, but I took some of the PMI courses, so the project management courses through PMI. The city also has a number of project management courses. So we have one that's specific to IT project management that's 2 days and looks at the workflows that we use as an organization to manage time, etc. We used to have a non-IT specific project management. The project management office at the city of Calgary offered a 5-day course, and there's some 2-day courses. So we have all sorts of internal stuff, and I've taken many of those, I think 3 or 4, and then through PMI, I did my again, over a decade ago, like the Certified Administration of Project Management. So went through that and got that certificate, and then just doing it.
Doing it.
And sometimes it starts small. So I actually had an 8-month contract with the city ages ago to project manage an event that doesn't exist anymore now. I did that, and then I did some volunteer project management for some nonprofits, actually animal rescue groups. It's like point behind me because I have a rescue dog back there down there somewhere. So I project managed their big fundraising event for them for a couple of years. And so just like before I worked in project management, getting my feet wet more formally, and just like I always say, like, I just say yes to weird stuff. So if somebody throws something at me, I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Maybe that could be the title of the chapter in a book, The Road to Being a Smart City Project Manager. Say yes to weird stuff.
Well, like if it excites you, though, like if it sounds interesting, and that's always been the thing, we're so quick to dismiss things that maybe don't make sense or seem too complicated. And I'm just like, yeah, tell me more. Like lean into that weirdness, or that seems impossible. I'm in. Like, tell me more. So
lean into the weirdness. That could be
another chapter.
Well, it sounds like an attitude that you already bring from the beginning, because you mentioned a couple of minutes ago that you came to Calgary on a whim and basically stayed on because there was interesting stuff to be done and challenges to take on.
Yeah.
Which I would say is definitely a project management attitude, because, if you're into the repeat what we already know, you kind of look for another job than project management, I think.
There's no 2 days that are the same, and there's no 2 projects that are the same. You need to be prepared to do things on a whim a little bit and know how to handle that when something shifts. So it's not a bad way to go.
From the IPMA competencies list, creativity and being able to react to what's happening, because you start with a plan, but then of course stuff doesn't go according to plan. Otherwise, no project management would be needed. If everything just went according to plan, then you needed the project manager just for one day in the beginning to write the plan, and then that was it. But that's not the way stuff works usually. How do you make this visionary statement that can be a million things? How do you fill it in? Because once you start working on the projects, it's going to get detailed. It's going to get specific. I mean, there's usually only 1 or 2 things coming out of the project of the million things that make life better. So how is that process going, and what's your role as a project manager in getting to 1 or 2 specific things that do make life better?
My role is really unique. So again, like I was brought on to build the digital equity strategy for the city of Calgary, and now I'm executing projects attached to that strategy. Its purpose is to make a more equitable experience for Calgarians. So in everything that strategy touches is making lives better.
So the strategic plan is kind of the framework to make that specific in the area of digital equity.
Exactly. And even so the like an ATSC3 project, a program that we're building, yes, it's experimentation, but the lens on that experimentation is how are we improving our services? So some of the things that might come out of it are things that most people won't consider making their lives better, like variable street signing, like who cares? But well, if you how much money are we saving by not changing signs all the time? We can as we need to redirect traffic, adjust traffic speeds downstream of a collision so that you don't get bottlenecks, you don't get traffic jams, suggest reroutes so you're not backed up. You don't think about it, but how frustrated are you when you're sitting in traffic for 2 hours and like, if only I knew to get off at the exit 2 behind me.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if we can just do that with this technology, we're making your lives better, but you don't probably notice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And then if we can send you emergency communications, like I've been on a plane and half the plane doesn't get the emergency alert when it lands and the other half does. Well, neither of my phones got that, but the person next to me did. So what's the alert? What do I need to know about? Where am I not driving? Most people probably won't notice a difference, but the people who notice the difference, or the people who weren't getting alerts before, or the fact that like nobody died and everybody evacuated. Like no one, sorry, that's like, but you know, we had this massive flood and we're relying on door knocking and like yelling from megaphones to evacuate people because it was changing so rapidly. To be able to reach more people because we can push out the information that they need, that's making lives better.
Yeah.
So for me, any project that our whole group talks about, like sometimes I'm a bit of a hammer when I'm like, okay, well, have we thought about this equity piece? Or like, this is really great, but here's what's missing. Or what about these folks that actually can't engage with that thing? So how do we make it so that they can engage with this thing? Because we're smart cities or technology, and it's really easy to get caught up in the excitement of this tech and what it can do and forget that some folks can't leverage that. So how do we make things accessible for them as well?
So it's also a conscious effort to think of the gaps and what's missing, or think of the, let's say, the non-obvious stuff that's also there.
There are so many tech and systems-oriented conversations that can get a lot of people very excited about big data and data transfers. And isn't it great that we have a parking meter that can give us the weather forecast and all this kind of thing? But one of the most profound conversations I had in my research when you and I met, Erin, was one when I talked to a project manager about a lighting installation that he was putting in this parking complex that he was very proud of. After I listened to this, it was impressive and that was great. But then I said to him, what would your daughter think about this? And there was this pause. And he said, I'm sorry? I said, this lighting installation, it sounds very impressive, and I'm sure that the transportation and mobility community is very happy with it. But would your daughter feel safe going to her car at night as a result of your work? And it was on the tip of his tongue to say how out of bounds I was bringing his daughter into it. But then he realized, right, that the secondary outcome, i.e. safety, that he hadn't been giving enough attention was in fact, arguably, the lighting installation project was paying the bills. But when he started putting into that, looking at it through the lens of safety, the conversation changed. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, when safety is so much a secondary outcome to so many things in the city of Calgary, I wonder if that was part of the vision when the author decided that making lives better every day was the phrase to be used. I wonder if they had safety in mind, because it's coming through so many of the things that you talk about.
Like, I hope so. And I imagine so, because I think a fairly safety-oriented city. Feel like it should ever be a secondary outcome. But you're right in that it often isn't the first thing on some of these projects that we're thinking about. But hopefully, if you're looking at everything through the lens of making lives better, safety is a huge part of that. So all of those quality of life pieces are a huge part of that. So how are we considering them in the work that we do? And I can only really speak for myself in the work that I do and say, as you know, like, safety is this piece that's really top of mind. And that's one of the barriers for digital equity is digital literacy and folks having the skills they need, not just to connect, but to do so safely and to feel confident and to know what information they can and should trust and what information they should be wary of. That is a safety component.
Conversation,
We leave the conversation there for the moment. We'll pick it up in episode 2 of this pilot episode of the Cities Are for Living podcast. In the second part of this interview with Erin, we'll hear about Calgary's basic digital literacy course and strategy for improving the digital literacy and education across Calgary and the different communities, including migrant groups and other non-English speakers. We'll also hear about some of the partnerships and effective approaches that have been developed together with the city and other academic institutions and community groups. So join us for the next episode where we pick up this conversation. And thank you for listening to the Cities Are for Living podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Cities Are for Living podcast of the IPMA, the International Project Management Association. Please feel free to send us feedback, your thoughts on the content we provided, and if you'd like to get involved via sur@ipma.world. The SUR standing for Smarter Urban Rural, one of the task teams that's alluded to in one of our pilot episodes. So sur@ipma.world. We'd love to hear your feedback, and please get in contact. Tell us what you think.